So after a very strong and promising start and an odd uneven mid-season, we finally get to the end of the first season of Outer Range. And out of the millions of questions this season leaves us, there's only one we can definitely answer right now. Was it any good? Well, let me draw you a parallel, my dear fellow watcher. I recently watched another TV show called Yellow Jackets. It is about how a plane transporting a girls' football team crashes on the wilderness and they somehow devolve into a ritualistic cannibal tribe. All of this is teased on the first episode of the show. Then what ensues is another 9 episodes of different storylines in different timelines, while the main mystery of the show is barely touched upon until the very last couple of episodes. Now, to me, while Outer Range is the superior one, in this aspect the two shows are pretty similar. And does that mean either show is bad? No, but it doesn't mean they're good either. The first couple of episodes introduced a great mix of the sci-fi and western genres that would make us question the identities and motivations of great multi-layered characters in face of fantastic events mixed with a murder investigation on small-town Virginia. Country folk of very different backgrounds and a mysterious outsider would all somehow converge around a mysterious black hole amidst a murder investigation while still having to deal with their own demons. It doesn't get more basic sci-fi mixed with basic western than that. But then, already in episode 3, things started to get weird. Almost every scene with Sheriff Joy and Wayne Tillerson is straight out comical. And at first I was okay with that because these were characters we had not spent too much time with yet. But then episode 4 came out together with episode 3 and they are so different tonally that it's just jarring to watch one after the other. Also, episode 4 introduces these strange, out of place, surreal and comical sequences that we didn't have before. I mean, I loved Billy singing, but this doesn't make any sense. There are also the Twin Peaks references I talked about in my previous videos about the series, and they are okay. Make your references, but move on. This is not Twin Peaks, you are not David Lynch, and you didn't introduce any of this in the first couple of episodes. By putting stuff like this out of nowhere, you're just confusing your audience. Your show can't be half serious, half surreal, and it hurts my brain that I don't know what I'm supposed to be watching. And then we had episodes 5 and 6 that I can't remember anything that happened on those two to save my life, and then 7 in the finale, which I barely remember too. More on that later. Throughout the whole season, the actors delivered outstanding performances and the technical aspects, which I mentioned on the first video I made about the series, were consistently great. But unfortunately, and I say that with a heavy heart because I really liked the premiere and had high hopes for the series, apart from some really great scenes here and there, like the fight in the kitchen and the very last scene of the season, I guess that's about it for praise. After episode 2, things started to go... I can't even say downhill because it's not a straight line at all. And that by itself is an ironically fitting representation of the show's issues. Everything is all over the place, especially the tone and the story. First there was a big shift in tone from the second to the third episode. But then even inside the same episode, we would have these crazy shifts when at times the show was dead serious and at times it was a straight up comedy. Sometimes it was perfectly grounded in reality and other times it was straight up surreal. And what strikes me as odd is that it goes from one extreme to the other so quickly and poignantly that I can't help but to assume that those were artistic choices and not mistakes.
I've changed my name, but no one.
And a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak.
It was Perry.
I mean, those were mistakes, don't get me wrong. None of it works at all, but they don't seem like errors of execution. They seem like correct execution of bad ideas. And the reason I say they are mistakes, plain and simple, is because we, as an audience, need a clearly defined tone. Again, this is not David Lynch. This is supposed to be a sci-fi / western thriller, and that's what you told me in the first couple of episodes, so we need a tone. How the fuck can this be the same series in 2 different scenes related to the same event? As I've said before, the fact that almost everything on episode 4 about Trevor's death is treated as a comedy is bizarre. This murder story is supposed to be one of the main storylines of a thriller. Where are the thrills? Also, in between the straight sci-fi / western thriller, we would have these weird, surreal scenes where everything looked different, from the cinematography to the general demeanor of the characters. To the point that in my video about episodes 3 and 4, I went as far as to theorize that Royal had been replaced by another man, because he looked and acted so differently by the end of that episode. But as it turns out, that doesn't seem to be the case, because it didn't happen only to Royal. Through the course of the season, every one of the Abbotts, with the exception of Amy, who, as it turns out, is really Autumn,
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
started to turn into these weird, slow, dense, overly dramatic versions of themselves. And I guess I gave the writers too much credit because the first 2 episodes were that good. I was sure that there had to be a plausible explanation for that, but as it turns out, there isn't. I guess it was just supposed to be that the characters were changing through their arcs. And oh boy did they miss the mark on that. The Tillersons went absolutely nowhere, Cecilia barely shows up the entire season, Perry just walks around and has these weird out of place dialogues, and Rhett apologizes to Maria, rides bulls, complains about Perry, and in the end reaches a conclusion to a story that wasn't even the one they set up on the beginning. It started out with something about him getting his life together, taking his career seriously and getting the girl. And it ended with him wanting to leave because his family is a mess. And it's not that his story can't go in that direction, of course it can. And we have been seeing signs of his growing frustration towards his family. As a matter of fact, that is the character arc they chose to develop for him. But if this is the story you want to tell about this character, then why set it up like that in the beginning? And sure, these are bad, but I guess I could overlook some of these if at least we had the story they set up for the entire series. But do they do that? The Hole and the Sci-Fi take a backseat to Trevor's murder investigation, which doesn't really go anywhere since Perry just ends up confessing, only marginally popping up here and there. And this is not even the worst of it. You see, when you're telling the story, you have to be exactly one step ahead of your audience, especially if your story is a thriller. The audience can't know what is going to happen before you tell them, but they have to have something to look forward to. They need to be able to create expectations on what's going to happen in your story. If you are one step behind your audience and the story is too predictable, people may lose interest. But if you are ahead of your audience and you widen the gap too much in order to create mystery and leave your audience completely in the dark, people will lose interest too. And that's what happens in Outer Range. They widen that gap so much in the main story about the Hole that everything starts to feel random. For example, and I even questioned this on a previous video, Royal very strongly doesn't want his family to know about the Hole. And now, several episodes after the fact, we know that it is because he came from the Hole. From the moment he first wanted to hide the Hole from his family up until the point it was revealed he came from the Hole, we were given zero reasons to speculate why he wanted to hide it. It's okay to do this once in a while, but this show does this to everything. Autumn keeps talking to someone on the phone, much later revealed to be her mother. Besides being obvious it will be related to the Hole somehow, the show never gives us a reason to care about what happened to Perry's wife. Everybody keeps breaking rocks, the mountain disappeared, and that dude keeps talking about mastodons. And these are just the ones I managed to remember off the top of my head. And then, near the end, we have two supposedly big reveals. Royal came from the Hole, and Autumn is in fact Amy.
Shocked!
And three major events. Perry falls into the Hole and it disappears, his wife shows up, and Joyce seemingly travels into the past. Okay, alright. And what am I supposed to be feeling here? And what are the implications of that? We are never told. But the issue is not that we are never told, it is that we are never even hinted at why any of this is important. We are never given reasons to anticipate anything. This is not mystery. This is just a bunch of random shit being thrown at us only to be explained later. It lacks the main component of what makes a mystery compelling, the anticipation, the guesswork. Outer Range started out great, but in the end, I get the impression that they bit much more than they could chew with all the character arcs, side stories, themes, and even visual styles. It all becomes a big misguided mess that tries to do too much of everything and mix antagonistic elements that just don't go together. I was surprised to see that the creator, co-executive producer, co-showrunner, and main writer Brian Watkins only has this very series on his IMDb page. Nothing else. And maybe this is precisely the issue. And that's a shame because all in all, it's a great production. It's really well made. The ideas are there, the premises are all there, and they are great. They just needed some much better development. Maybe someone with a little more experience in conducting a story and who would know how much is too much and how far you can bend your tone and aesthetics without them breaking and making the mess that Outer Range unfortunately ended up being. But hey, that's what I saw. What did you see?